Alright, so it's been a while since I've worked on the Pocher model. As I said in another video, I'm waiting for the leather. Before I get too far with this, I want to cover this in leather. And like I said, it's missing from the kit, so I'm waiting for my friend to find some more. So before then, though, I want to go ahead and get this ready for that. And I think I mentioned earlier that what I want to do is when I cover this with the leather, I actually want to wrap it around that edge. And I don't think that's the way the kit was intended, but I think it'll give me a nicer edge. So what I want to go ahead and do now, and I just lost the blade out of my X-Acto knife. Yeah, I need to find that. But anyways, what I want to do now is, got to find something else to point with, is this area right here, that area goes over, or it goes into right there. I don't know how well that dark plastic is going to show in the video, but that goes in there. So I don't want to cut that off because that helps hold the door latch mechanism in place. But what I think I'll do is I'll cut into here with a cutoff wheel and a Dremel, maybe about that deep. So when I roll the leather around, I can tuck that in right there. And what I want to go ahead and do now is cut these off and reattach them, because those go right in here. So I want to go ahead and cut those off and reattach them in here. And again, when I get the leather, I'll measure the thickness of it and I'll cut that thickness off of that edge all the way around so that I don't make the door any thicker. So to cut that off, I'll try these flush cutters, and we'll see how well that cuts that off. Now this, and I'm not just going to go one big squeeze, because if I try that, it may just break instead of cut. So I'll give a few little squeeze cuts in here, and I could use a saw, but we'll just see what happens here. There's a little bit, because this piece is fairly thick. And again, what I'm doing here, you know, it's completely optional, I guess, and that'll get glued in right in there, and that'll just fill in that gap once the door's together. Now, as far as the glue that I typically use, you've got solvent that will work with this material, so I may use that to kind of stick it on there, but I'll back it up with thick CA here. So we just take a little bit, and there's not really much to stick it onto here. You got that little nub there from the hinge, and I found that this material, this plastic, it really takes a lot for this solvent to finally kind of eat into it. It's kind of resilient, or kind of resistant to the solvent, but it does eventually grab. And this one just doesn't have a lot of surface. There we go, that'll work. That's good enough for that one for now. And there's a little bit of a gap here, but that'll get filled in, so don't worry about that. And the other one, again, it's fairly thick, so we'll just go in a little bit. Now, one of my, well, somebody left a comment on one of my videos, which I definitely appreciate any kind of comment, any kind of question. And the comment said that after seeing my videos, he was a little bit nervous about starting his. And I can fully appreciate that and understand that, because before I started this one, I watched a ton of videos. There's a few forums out there, scale model cars? Man, I can't remember anything. But there's a few forums out there, guys building these. And I looked at and read as much as I could before starting, and I still didn't feel fully prepared for starting. But when you're starting something like this that you know is going to be a pain, I noticed that if you if you look at the whole job, if you look at the whole thing as a whole, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And I just recommend that you know, do your homework first. Look at as much as you can, watch as many videos as you can. Hopefully something I'm doing is helpful. And before you actually start building the kit, before you start building the model, make sure you thoroughly understand the instructions. These Pocher manuals, especially the older style, this one, these instructions are really not that clear. They're really vague in a lot of areas. I spent a lot of time just studying the instructions until before I would start one of those things. So again, don't look at the whole thing as a whole, but kind of break it down into groups, break it down into smaller sections. Like just look at the engine, you know, just start with the engine, look at all the instructions, the pictures of the engine, look at the pictures on the instruction manual, flip through several pages, look at photos online of the finished engine on how other people did it, and then when you feel, well, I can't say I felt completely comfortable, ready to start it, but you got to start at some point. Just take your time with it. Take your time. Go slow. Don't rush it. If you get to something that's a little difficult or confusing, just take a pause from it and think about it for a few days. I think I mentioned this on another video, you know, measure like 10 times and then sleep on it. Come back the next day, measure it a few more times before you actually cut or grind on anything. Because there have been times where I would put a part on to fit it and it looked like it was way off. It looked like it wasn't anywhere close. But then the next day I put it back on and actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was. So yeah, and I'm not quite sure exactly why. Maybe it's just me, maybe. And anytime I use CA around these hinges, I always verify to make sure I didn't glue the hinge shut. Now this is thick CA. The thin CA is much more likely to run and seep into places where you don't want it. The thicker CA is definitely easier to manage. And I'm just kind of building up the support on the back side here. But I would just say, just do it. Just start it. Do it. Take your time. Be patient. You know it's going to be very frustrating and tedious and time-consuming, but also very rewarding. Things are going to happen. You're going to break off screws, those little tiny screws. You know, you're going to break them off into the plastic. I showed you on a previous video how you can use a fine point of a soldering iron to kind of heat it and melt it and push it through. So, you know, don't panic when something majorly bad happens. Worst case scenario, you can always find replacement parts on YouTube. So, not YouTube, good grief. You can't buy replacement parts on YouTube. eBay. eBay has replacement parts for all these cars. Sometimes you got to be patient and wait for them to come up. But, you know, you should be able to eventually find replacement parts on eBay. Individual parts for these don't tend to be that extremely expensive. The models themselves are, but the actual individual parts aren't too bad. Now, that doesn't look great right now, but any gaps can be filled. I'm not worried about that yet. Again, this edge is going to be taken down however thick the leather is. So so that's in there. It's not going to get lost. It's not done. That's going to be filled and sanded smooth and primed. And then same with this one. I'll do the same thing to this one. And then I'll do the same thing to the other door. I'm not going to make you watch me do that to all 4 of those on both doors, or all 2 hinges on both doors. So I'll put this away for now. I'll do the others off camera. The other thing I wanted to go ahead and do here, and again, I'm just getting as much done as I can now until I can get some leather in. the other thing I want to do here is go ahead and put these windows in these frames. And I mentioned on a previous video that the little bumps sticking out here are supposed to go in those holes here, but they weren't quite spaced right for that. So I picked the one that seemed like it fit the best for the overall placement, and I cut the other one off. And what I'm going to use to glue that in, that actually fits pretty well right there. I like that, that fits nice. So what I'm going to use to lock that in place is, I'll grab it here, is this. I love this stuff. Laser bond, I'm sure there's a few different manufacturers of this stuff. Now I have a tube already open, but this is almost empty, and I don't want to run out halfway through. Now the nice thing about this stuff is, if I can find my scissors, it won't set until you're ready for it to set. So you can really take your time and get it into position, and then when you're ready for it to finally set, you just zap it with the light, with the black light here. Does this one work? There it goes. And I actually got these at my local Rite Aid store. And I think I mentioned, yeah, this one's already nasty, messy. I think I mentioned in another video, it's like they made that cap for it to stand this way, but always keep it stored this way. I had this one laid flat over in the corner, and it had leaked out in the packaging. So let me clean that up before I get it all over everything, and get back with you here in just a second. Okay, now hopefully there's still some left in here, but we'll go ahead. Now you can clean this stuff up with alcohol, just normal. I would use I wouldn't use I wouldn't use rubbing alcohol because that's got oils and stuff, but just alcohol. I actually didn't have any. I used acetone, and I can still feel a little bit of sticky on there. But if you're going to use anything to clean clear parts, test it on an area that won't be seen. I have learned the hard way that some things will fog up clear parts, and you can have, clear parts can be different types of plastic. And yeah, I learned, and there's even a huge difference between isopropyl alcohol and denatured alcohol. I was cleaning a plexiglass lens on an aircraft, Navlight lens, and the manual said to use, man, I already forgot what it said, isopropyl. If any of you know the science between alcohols, please put it in the comments. And apparently I grabbed the wrong kind of alcohol, because when I started cleaning it, it fogged it up. It's really, yeah, I messed it up. Our composite shop was able to buff it out. But if you're going to use anything like acetone or alcohol or whatever to clean glue or anything off of clear plastic parts, test it on a non-seen part first, because if you fog that up, you can really, it'll really ruin your day. Now, remember I dropped my my blade tip. I need to find it. I'll just grab a new one here. I'll have to look for that later. In the meantime, try not to step on it. But got two of them there. Because what I want to do first, now that window fit in fairly decently, but I noticed there's a little bit of an edge here from where it came off of the tree. And if you're careful, you can just kind of very carefully shave that off. Now you don't want to dig in too deep. Keep your blade fairly flat. And you can also go across that way to take off any edges or burrs like that. All right? And it's not completely off, but it's off enough that it won't get in the way. And plus, that's going to be inside the frame where it won't be seen. Okay? Now, when we start applying this, now you can put it on the metal part or on the clear part. Put it on the part that's going to be less messy for you. In other words, if I put it on here, well, I'm holding this and I want it kind of all the way around. So I'd have to plan on how I want to hold this so I could hold it this way while I put the clear part on. And I think if I do it this way, I'll have less chance of messing up and getting some on the clear part here. And you don't need much. And again, the good thing about this stuff is you can like clamp it in position, and if you get any ooze out or whatever, you can just wipe it with the clean rag. Got to let it all run down to the point. Of course, I'm hoping I didn't leak everything out in the package. Still feels like there's a little bit in there. You don't need too much. And just get a little bit in here. Get some in the frame. Can't really tell if it's coming out. There it is. Get some all the way around here into the frame. I don't think I really got too much in here. I probably don't even need that much. And then we take the clear part and the steady hand, which is, you know, not my strong point. Get that in here, and then start clamping it. Throw a clamp on here, and I don't want to scratch. Okay, I put tape on that so I won't scratch anything there. Clamp on here, clamp on there. Just enough to hold the window into the frame. Like that. And as you can see, it squeezed that UV curable resin around here. And I'm going to go ahead and set that. And it doesn't take much. I think maybe 10 seconds is really all it calls for. I typically do more than it really needs. We'll set here where it goes through. A little bit back here. And around here. And that should lock it on tight. Squeeze there. Okay. And that should do pretty well. Let me see if these clamps will reach up here. Just barely too short. Alrighty. We'll let that set for a little bit. I'll get back with you. Okay, so clamps are off. I have noticed in the past that once you put that light on it and it sets up, it still feels a little bit sticky for a day or two. Maybe a day or less. But it's done its thing. But by this time tomorrow, that'll feel perfectly dry and not sticky anymore. I guess that's normal, but it's good. It's holding on there. I just won't get too rough with it just yet. That's not the only glue you can use. Just do not use super glue or CA on clear parts. Now they do make, I don't have any and I've not tried it, but they do make CA glue that says it's safe for clear parts. You can try that, but again, I would test it on an edge first, because what CA or super glue normally does is it makes it fog up a bit. But again, they do make it safe for clear parts. That should work perfectly fine for this. It's just easier to clean up any mess because you can just wipe it off with a rag and then cure it up and you're good to go. I also found my blade, but again, I cut a little groove in here with my Dremel tool, the cut-off wheel. That'll give the leather a place to go, and I wrap that around. It's not as deep as I originally intended, but that's plenty deep enough. It'll be fine. It just gives a spot for that to wrap around too. I smoothed up the areas here where I cut those other pieces off, and I rounded off, sanded with a fine grit sandpaper. I sounded off the edge around here to make it easier to roll the leather around when I finally get to that part. And on the door, again, I just added more CA in here to fill in the gaps and gather more strength. Again, that'll get shaved down, that'll get filled and smoothed up, and made to look nice and pretty. So I'll do the other door off camera. I'm not going to have you watch me do all that. But this is where I'm going to leave the doors. I don't want to do any more until I get that covered in leather. So this is where I'll be done for the doors for now. I did have to put a little bit of filler. That's just a strip of styrene. I talked about that in a previous video. I still have to do that to the other door. But again, I'll do all of that on my own. Next video, I will either, pardon my reach there, I will either do the wheels, talk about how we build the wheels and put the spokes in, or maybe I'll have the leather by then. So next video will either be leather or wheels. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm guessing it'll be wheels. So I don't know if I'll get to it next week or the week after, but that's what I'm planning for the next video, because I still have 3 more, actually I have 4 more wheels to build, kind of 3.5, and I'll talk about it later. So anyways, that's where I'll end this one for now. Hopefully this is helpful to somebody, and as always, thanks for watching.